In the remote wilderness of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, a desperate military search and rescue dog will lead former Army Ranger Logan Hayes into a dangerous government conspiracy that will transform his isolated existence forever. When a Belgian Malinois named Scout appears at his secluded homestead with blood on his tactical vest, Logan follows him to an abandoned rescue training compound where he uncovers a shocking truth. It was a classified operation investigating environmental sabotage, and Scout's handler, Captain Maya Reynolds, has been abducted by a shadowy paramilitary organization with powerful political connections. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first light of dawn crept across the Bitterroot Valley, illuminating the rugged peaks that had become Logan Hayes' refuge from a world he no longer understood. At 45, the former Army Ranger had found solace in these mountains, building a life of deliberate isolation following 15 years of combat deployments that had left him with both physical and invisible scars. His cabin sat nestled against the tree line, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor and 20 from the small town of Elkridge. The simple structure represented everything Logan valued now: self-sufficiency, functionality, distance from the complications of modern society. Solar panels provided minimal electricity, a natural spring supplied fresh water, and the surrounding forest offered both sustenance and security. The morning followed Logan's unchanging routine, checking his perimeter, tending his small vegetable garden, and preparing for a day of woodworking. The handcrafted furniture he occasionally sold in town provided enough income to supplement his military pension, requiring minimal interaction with the outside world. The snap of a branch in the nearby forest halted Logan mid-motion as he split kindling for the evening fire. His body tensed instinctively, muscles remembering training that his mind had tried to forget. Nobody ventured this deep into the wilderness accidentally, especially not at this early hour. With practiced silence, Logan retrieved the hunting rifle he kept nearby, moving with the fluid efficiency that had once made him one of the military's elite operators. He positioned himself behind the woodpile, weapon ready but not raised. Years of combat experience had taught him to assess before engaging. The rustling continued, drawing closer. Then, emerging from the thick underbrush, came a sight that momentarily confounded Logan's trained instincts: a dog, clearly exhausted and injured, wearing what appeared to be a specialized tactical vest with military markings. Logan lowered his rifle slightly, studying the animal with experienced eyes. The Belgian Malinois showed signs of dehydration and fatigue, but maintained the alert posture characteristic of working military dogs. Blood stained the vest. Not the dog's blood, Logan assessed quickly, but transfer from someone else. Easy. There, Logan said quietly, recognizing the dog's training. Where's your handler? The dog's ears perked forward at the word handler, followed by a sharp bark. Then, to Logan's surprise, the animal turned back toward the forest, took several steps, and looked over its shoulder expectantly. Most people would dismiss the behavior, but Logan had worked with military K9 units enough to recognize the clear communication. The dog wanted him to follow. "You want me to come with you?" Logan asked, more to process the situation aloud than expecting the animal to understand. The dog barked once decisively, then took several more steps toward the forest before looking back again. Logan hesitated. Following a strange dog into the Montana wilderness went against every self-preservation instinct he'd developed since retreating to these mountains. And yet something about the animal's determined gaze and the military vest triggered a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. "All right," Logan muttered, ducking into his cabin to grab his go-bag. Another habit from his ranger days that civilian life hadn't erased. He checked the contents quickly, First aid supplies, water, emergency rations, basic survival gear. He added extra ammunition for his sidearm, a satellite phone, and a detailed topographical map of the surrounding 50 miles. "Lead the way," he told the dog, "but this better not be a wild goose chase." The Malinois took off immediately, setting a pace that balanced urgency with Logan's ability to follow. The animal moved with purpose, occasionally circling back to ensure Logan remained on track, exhibiting training that confirmed Logan's suspicions about its military origins. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, Logan noticed signs that triggered his tactical awareness. Fresh tire tracks on seldom-used fire roads, broken branches from vehicles too large for these narrow paths, spent shell casings, 5 56mm military grade, recently fired. "What happened out here, boy?" Logan murmured, examining a cartridge. The dog whined impatiently, urging him onward. They continued for nearly 3 hours, moving steadily higher into the mountains. Logan's mind cycled through possibilities. Drug operations sometimes used these remote areas, though this didn't fit typical cartel patterns. Militia groups occasionally trained in the wilderness, but they rarely employed military working dogs or left such obvious evidence of their presence. Finally, they crested a ridge that offered a view of a small valley nestled between 2 steep mountainsides. Logan dropped to a prone position, using compact binoculars to survey what lay below. A compound of several buildings showed clear signs of a coordinated attack. 2 structures had partially collapsed, with scorch marks suggesting explosives. Shell casings glinted in the midday sun. The precision of the destruction spoke of tactical training rather than random violence. "What the hell?" Logan whispered to himself, focusing on a damaged sign at the entrance. "Wilderness Emergency Response Training Center." The dog beside him whined softly, pawing at the ground. "That's your home, isn't it?" Logan said, noting the logo on the dog's vest matched the sign. "And I'm guessing you're the only one who made it out." Logan studied the compound with the methodical attention to detail that had kept him alive through 4 combat tours. The attack pattern was professional. Entry points had been breached simultaneously, communications equipment targeted early, security measures efficiently neutralized. This wasn't random vandalism or enthusiastic amateurs. The operation had military precision. "Let's get a closer look," Logan told the dog, "but we go in careful." They descended into the small valley, Logan moving from cover to cover with the dog following his lead. As they approached the main building, Logan detected no signs of movement or surveillance. Either the attackers were confident no one would investigate, or they'd already retrieved what they came for. Inside the main structure, the destruction continued. Training equipment lay scattered and broken. A row of kennels showed signs of forced entry. But what caught Logan's attention was a wall of photographs. Handlers with their K9 partners, many wearing uniforms from various agencies. The Wilderness Emergency Response Training Center wasn't just any facility, it specialized in training. Search and rescue dogs for disaster response, wilderness operations, and environmental emergencies. Logan stopped at one photograph showing the Malinois beside him with a female handler in tactical gear. The caption read, "Captain Maya Reynolds and Scout, Yellowstone Wildfire Deployment 2023. "So you're Scout," Logan said, looking down at the dog, who maintained his alert vigilance despite obvious exhaustion. "And your handler is Captain Reynolds." Scout whined softly, nosing the photograph. Logan continued investigating, finding evidence that raised more questions than answers. In what appeared to be an office, he discovered a hidden door behind a filing cabinet, not well hidden enough to escape detection by the attackers who had forced it open. Beyond was a sophisticated communications room with government-grade equipment, now damaged and partially destroyed. Maps on the wall showed detailed tracking of several locations marked in the nearby national forests. A partially burned document contained phrases like Operation Watershed and environmental sabotage, alongside references to a corporation called Northern Resource Initiatives. "This wasn't just a rescue training center," Logan murmured. "This was some kind of intelligence operation." Scout suddenly tensed, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Logan froze, listening. The distant sound of engines broke the silence. "Someone's coming back," Logan whispered. "We need to move. Now." They retreated to a hillside overlooking the compound, concealing themselves among the rocks as two black SUVs pulled up to the main building. Men with tactical gear and weapons emerged, moving with military precision, speaking in hushed tones that carried through the mountain air. "Check everything again," ordered one man, clearly in command. "The director wants to be sure we got all the evidence." "What about the woman?" asked another. "Being taken care of. She'll talk eventually. Everyone does." Logan's jaw tightened as he watched them methodically search the compound. These weren't random criminals or even standard paramilitary types. They moved like special operations personnel, disciplined, coordinated, thorough. "Looks like your handler might still be alive," Logan whispered to Scout, who remained perfectly still beside him, watching the men below with focused intensity. After 30 minutes of searching, the men loaded several containers into one SUV and departed, heading deeper into the mountains rather than back toward civilization. "They're not going toward town," Logan noted, tracing their probable route. On his topographical map, there's nothing for 50 miles in that direction except old logging camps and abandoned mining operations. Scout's ears perked up at some subtle sound beyond Logan's perception. The dog's training was evident. Even exhausted and concerned for his handler, he maintained situational awareness. Logan had a decision to make. The logical choice was to return to civilization and contact authorities. But which authorities? If this was a classified operation, local police would be useless at best, dangerous at worst if corruption was involved. The alternative was to follow the SUVs, but that meant tracking a well-equipped force with unknown numbers and capabilities. Suicide for most civilians, a calculated risk even for someone with Logan's background. Scout looked at Logan expectantly, as if understanding the internal debate. The dog's determined eyes reflected a loyalty that transcended normal handler relationships. Captain Reynolds had clearly formed an exceptional bond with this animal, and Scout wasn't giving up on her. "Your captain must be something special," Logan told Scout, making his decision. "All right, we follow them, but smart. No direct engagement unless absolutely necessary." Logan checked his satellite phone, contemplating who he might call. After 15 years of service and 3 as a recluse, his list of trusted contacts had dwindled significantly. There was one person who might help without asking too many questions. Sergeant Major Marcus Wilson, now retired and working as a regional coordinator for veteran services in Missoula. The call connected after 4 rings. "Wilson, Mark, it's Hayes." A pause. "Logan, Jesus Christ, man. Thought you'd gone full mountain man on us. Everything okay?" "Need some information, off the record." Logan kept his voice low despite the distance between himself and the compound. "What do you know about a wilderness emergency response training center about 30 miles northeast of Elk Ridge?" "The search and rescue dog place? Not much. Government funded, I think. They do good work from what I hear. Train dogs for FEMA, National Park Service, that kind of thing. Why? Someone hit it, professional job, military precision." Wilson's tone changed immediately. "You witnessed this?" "Aftermath. Found one of their dogs wearing a tactical vest. He led me there. Place is destroyed. Signs of abduction. Dog's handler is missing." "Logan, this sounds like something for the FBI or—" "Someone's covering this up, Mark. The team that came back was too professional, too confident. This isn't random." A long silence followed. "What are you planning to do?" "Follow the trail. See where it leads." That's not smart, even for someone with your background. Probably not, Logan agreed. But I can't walk away from this. Another pause. The director there is Dr. Ellen Reeves, former Army veterinarian. Good reputation. The operation receives funding through Interior Department channels, but rumor says they occasionally work with environmental crime units. That's all I know. It's something. Thanks, Mark. Logan, Wilson's voice turned serious. Whatever this is, be careful. World's changed since you went off-grid. Lines between agencies aren't as clear as they used to be. Politics infects everything. Noted. And Logan, check in every 24 hours or I'm calling in favors to find you. The call ended, leaving Logan with the beginning of a framework, but far more questions than answers. He turned to Scout, who sat patiently despite his obvious exhaustion and concern. Looks like we've got a missing captain, a destroyed government facility, and a paramilitary. A force heading into the deep wilderness, Logan summarized. Your handler must have stumbled onto something significant. Scout's amber eyes remained fixed on Logan, a determined intelligence evident in his gaze. Let's move, Logan said, checking his weapons and supplies. We've got a trail to follow before it goes cold. As they set off toward the mountains, following the SUV's tracks, Logan felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, the clarity of purpose that came with a mission. His self-imposed isolation had provided peace, but had hollowed out something essential. Now, following a desperate military dog into unknown danger, Logan Hayes was fully present in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The mountain terrain grew increasingly challenging as Logan and Scout tracked the SUVs deeper into the wilderness. Old logging roads, long abandoned by commercial operations, provided the only viable vehicle routes through this remote section of the Bitterroot Range. Logan moved with practiced efficiency, balancing speed with stealth, his military training resurfacing with each calculated step. Scout proved an invaluable ally, his specialized training evident in how he navigated the difficult landscape. The Belgian Malinois maintained a steady pace despite his earlier exhaustion, occasionally ranging ahead to scout potential danger before returning to Logan's side. Their wordless communication developed rapidly, Logan reading the dog's subtle shifts in posture and ear position, Scout responding to Logan's hand signals and quiet commands. Whoever trained you did an exceptional job, Logan told Scout. During a brief water break, he offered his cupped palm filled with water, which the dog lapped gratefully. Military K9s I worked with were good, but you're something special. And late afternoon approached, the logging road began to deteriorate further, eventually becoming impassable for standard vehicles. Yet the SUV tracks continued, modified suspension systems, allowing them to navigate terrain most civilian vehicles couldn't handle. They're well equipped, Logan noted, studying the tracks. Custom vehicles, tactical training, coordinated operation. Professional outfit, not weekend warriors. The trail led to a narrow ravine where the road disappeared entirely. Logan crouched to examine the area, finding signs that the vehicles had stopped here. Bootprints led away from the SUVs toward a barely visible path cutting through dense undergrowth. They continued on foot from here, Logan said quietly. Smart, less visible approach. Scout's ears suddenly perked forward, his body tensing. Logan immediately dropped to a prone position, signaling the dog to stay low. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust a working dog's senses without question. Within moments, Logan heard what Scout had already detected, voices approaching along the narrow path. He and Scout retreated silently into the dense forest undergrowth, concealing themselves as 2 armed men in tactical gear appeared, sweeping the area with practiced vigilance. "Perimeter check clear," one reported into a radio. "No signs of activity or pursuit." "Copy that," came the response. slightly distorted by static. Complete your circuit and return to base. Directors arriving at 800 tomorrow. The men continued their patrol, passing within 15 feet of Logan and Scout's position without detecting them. Logan remained motionless until they disappeared around a bend in the trail, then waited 5 additional minutes before moving. "Good boy," he whispered to Scout, who had remained perfectly still despite the proximity of potentially hostile forces. "Now we know they're expecting someone important tomorrow morning." Dusk was approaching, bringing the rapid temperature drop characteristic of mountain elevations. Logan needed to make a decision: continue tracking in diminishing light with increasing risk of detection, or establish a secure position and resume at first light. "Strategic patience," Logan murmured to himself, recalling his ranger instructors' constant refrain. Sometimes waiting is the most aggressive action. He signaled Scout to follow as they moved away from the path, climbing to higher ground that would provide both concealment and observation advantage. Logan selected a natural depression sheltered by large boulders and dense pine, creating a makeshift camp invisible from below. As true darkness fell across the mountains, Logan removed a small thermal scope from his pack, scanning the area below. Approximately half a mile from their position, he detected the heat signatures of a compound nestled in a small valley. Several structures and multiple human figures moving with the disciplined patterns of security personnel. "That's our target," Logan told Scout, offering the dog some of his emergency rations, which Scout accepted with surprising gentleness. "Appears to be an old mining operation, repurposed." Logan studied the security patterns, counting at least 8 personnel, maintaining a standard patrol rotation. The operation's professionalism continued to trouble him. This wasn't typical criminal behavior, but something more organized, more disciplined. Using his satellite phone, Logan sent a text message to Wilson with GPS coordinates and a brief status update as promised. The response came minutes later, checking databases. Area shows as abandoned silver mine, ownership unclear, maintain distance until more info. Scout settled beside Logan in the small shelter, his body providing welcome warmth as the mountain night grew increasingly cold. Despite his obvious concern for his handler, the dog's training allowed him to rest while remaining alert to potential threats. Another testament to Captain Reynolds' expertise. "We'll find her," Logan promised quietly, running a hand across Scout's head. "First light, we move closer and gather intelligence." Morning arrived with the crystalline clarity unique to high mountain elevations. Logan woke instantly, years of military deployments having conditioned him to full alertness upon waking. Scout was already up, alert but silent, watching the valley below. Using the thermal scope, Logan conducted another sweep of the compound. Activity had increased. Additional personnel moving with purpose, vehicles being repositioned, security posture heightening. Preparations for the director's arrival. Logan's satellite phone vibrated with an incoming message from Wilson. Property registered to Shell Corporation linked to Northern Resource Initiatives. Major mining timber conglomerate with government contracts. CEO Edward Blackwood has high-level political connections. Exercise extreme caution. The information added another piece to the puzzle. Northern Resource Initiatives, the same corporation mentioned in the documents Logan had found at the destroyed training center. "Your handler uncovered something she wasn't supposed to," Logan told Scout. "Something valuable enough to risk. Attacking a government facility, they needed closer observation. Using natural cover and moving during patrol gaps Logan had memorized overnight, they worked their way to a ridge overlooking the compound's main entrance. From this vantage point, Logan could observe without thermal enhancement, gathering crucial details about the operation. The compound consisted of 5 structures, A main building utilizing the original mining office, 3 smaller outbuildings, and what appeared to be the reinforced entrance to the mine itself. Security consisted of 10 visible personnel with standardized equipment, suggesting private military contractors rather than regular corporate security. Mid-morning, the security posture shifted. Guards took positions at predetermined points. Communication increased and attention focused on the access road. Within minutes, 2 black SUVs identical to those Logan had observed at the training center approached the compound. From the second vehicle emerged a distinguished man in his 60s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in clothing too formal for the remote setting. Even from a distance, his authoritative bearing marked him as someone accustomed to power and deference. "That'll be our director," Logan murmured to Scout. "Blackwood, I'm guessing." The man was escorted immediately to the main building. 4 security personnel maintaining a protective formation around him. Logan adjusted his position slightly for a better view of the main building's entrance, careful to remain concealed among the natural rock formations. 30 minutes later, activity at the mine entrance increased. Equipment was moved, additional lighting established, and several individuals in what appeared to be scientific rather than tactical attire emerged from the main building, accompanied by Blackwood and the security detail. "They're accessing the mine," Logan observed, "but this doesn't look like a normal mining operation." Before the group disappeared into the reinforced entrance, Logan caught a crucial detail through his binoculars: a woman being escorted from the main building to join them. Her hands were bound, her clothing dirty but recognizably tactical. Even from this distance, the insignia on her jacket matched that on Scout's vest. Scout tensed immediately, a low whine escaping before Logan could signal for silence. The dog's reaction confirmed what Logan already suspected. They had found Captain Reynolds. "She's alive," Logan reassured Scout, keeping his voice to the barest whisper. "But they're taking her into the mine." This changed the tactical situation significantly. A rescue from the main building might have been feasible with proper planning and the element of surprise. Extracting someone from underground in a confined space with limited access points and unknown layout presented a far more complex challenge. One that would be virtually impossible for a single operator, even one with Logan's training. Logan weighed his options. Direct intervention would likely fail, resulting in his capture or death and no help for Captain Reynolds. Retreating to contact authorities carried its own risks. If Blackwood had the political connections Wilson suggested, standard law enforcement might be blocked, delayed, or compromised. A third option began forming in Logan's mind, a calculated risk requiring precision timing and substantial luck. If successful, it might provide both evidence of wrongdoing and leverage for Captain Reynolds' release. If unsuccessful. The satellite phone vibrated again. Wilson's message was brief but significant. EPA investigation into NRI for toxic waste dumping in watershed areas suspended last month by direct intervention from Senator Chambers' office. Captain Reynolds' unit was conducting environmental monitoring in same regions, connection likely. The pieces aligned into a clearer picture. Captain Reynolds and her K9 unit had discovered evidence of environmental crimes significant enough to threaten a powerful corporation with high-level political protection. The attack on the training center wasn't random. It was targeted elimination of evidence and witnesses. Scout's eyes remained fixed on the mine entrance, where his handler had disappeared, his body vibrating with barely contained urgency. Despite his elite training, the dog's personal bond with Captain Reynolds created a vulnerability that might compromise his usual discipline. "I know you want to go after her right now," Logan told Scout quietly. "But that would get you killed and wouldn't help her. We need to be smarter than they are." Logan studied the compound layout again, noting patrol patterns, camera positions, and potential weaknesses. As a former ranger, he had conducted similar analysis on countless operations, identifying insertion points and extraction routes. The difference now was stark. No team to execute specialized roles, no support elements, no quick reaction force if things went wrong. Just a former soldier, a loyal dog, and a rapidly narrowing window of opportunity. We need more information, Logan decided, and we need it from inside that compound. Night would provide better cover for closer reconnaissance. Until then, Logan would continue observation, gathering every detail that might prove useful. Scout settled beside him, somehow understanding the necessity of patience despite his obvious concern. "We'll get her out," Logan promised, his voice carrying the quiet certainty that had once inspired confidence in soldiers under his command. "But we do it right." As the sun began its westward descent, Logan's mind worked through potential scenarios with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. The isolation he had embraced in these mountains had been an escape from a world that no longer made sense to him after war. Now, that same isolation might prove advantageous. No one would miss him if this went wrong. No one would be endangered by his choices. For the first time in 3 years, Logan Hayes felt the familiar clarity of purpose that came with accepting a mission where the objective mattered more than personal safety. Captain Reynolds needed help. Environmental crimes were being concealed through violence, and powerful people believed themselves beyond accountability. Logan checked his weapons and supplies, preparing for nightfall and the dangerous approach to come. Beside him, Scout watched with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. "Rest while you can," Logan told the dog. "Tonight, we move." Darkness descended on the mountains like a tactical advantage, one that Logan embraced with the practiced mindset of a veteran operator. The temperature dropped significantly, bringing a crystalline clarity to the night sky while creating breath. Clouds that necessitated careful movement and positioning. Logan knew that thermal imaging would render such precautions meaningless against professional security, but he operated under the assumption of facing the full spectrum of counter-surveillance technology. Advantage of these remote operations, Logan whispered to Scout as they prepared to move, is that overconfidence often creates vulnerabilities. They believe isolation protects them more than security protocols. Logan had spent the remaining daylight hours cataloging every detail of the compound's operations. Shift changes occurred every 6 hours, with a 15-minute overlap for briefing. The southeast corner had a blind spot where the camera coverage didn't quite overlap. 2 guards consistently took smoking breaks at the rear of the main building around 2200 hours. Before departing their observation position, Logan created a contingency cache, burying his satellite phone, extra ammunition, emergency medical supplies, and water in a location he could find again if necessary. Standard procedure for operations. Behind enemy lines, never carry anything you couldn't afford to lose if captured. Tactical approach, Logan told Scout, securing a small pack containing only essential equipment. Silent and slow. Follow my signals precisely. Scout seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, his training translating Logan's quiet commands into precise action. They descended from their elevated position using the natural terrain for concealment, careful to avoid dislodging rocks or disturbing the native wildlife that might alert the security teams to their presence. The approach took nearly 2 hours for a distance that could have been covered in 20 minutes with less caution. Logan utilized every shadow, every depression in the terrain, moving only during moments when the perimeter guard's attention was directed elsewhere. Scout followed flawlessly, his natural predatory stealth complementing his specialized training. They reached the southeast corner blind spot at 21:37 hours. Logan had identified this position as their best insertion point, a drainage culvert that ran beneath the perimeter fence, likely installed during the mine's original construction and overlooked in the security redesign. The opening was barely 18 inches in diameter, tight for Logan's frame, but manageable with proper technique. "Wait for my signal," Logan whispered to Scout, removing his pack and pushing it through the culvert first. Logan navigated the narrow space with controlled breathing and methodical movement, emerging on the compound side behind a stack of equipment crates that provided immediate cover. Scout followed with significantly greater ease, his lean body designed for precisely this kind of maneuverability. Now, inside the perimeter, Logan took a moment to orient himself. The main building stood 40 yards to the north, the mine entrance 60 yards northeast. Between their position and these objectives moved 4 security personnel in standard patrol patterns. The smoking break Logan had observed would begin in approximately 20 minutes, creating a brief window with reduced vigilance. Logan and Scout remained motionless in their concealed position, allowing their senses to absorb the operational environment. Beyond the expected sounds of the security team's movements, Logan detected the low hum of generators, occasional radio chatter, and, most significantly, the sound of equipment operating from within the mine entrance. "They're working on something important," Logan whispered, "even at night." At precisely 21:58 hours, 2 guards moved to their usual position behind the main building, lighting cigarettes and engaging in casual conversation. Their discipline noticeably relaxed during this unauthorized break. Logan seized the opportunity, signaling Scout to follow as they moved quickly but silently toward the main building's rear entrance. The door featured a standard keycard access system, significant security for a remote location, but not insurmountable. Logan removed a small electronic device from his pack, a legacy from his military days that he'd never quite managed to return during his discharge processing. The universal bypass tool required 15 seconds to override the magnetic lock, granting them access with no alarm trigger. Inside, the building was surprisingly modern, given its remote location and original purpose. What had once been a mining operations administrative office now contained advanced communications equipment, multiple workstations, and the unmistakable infrastructure of a sophisticated command center. Logan signaled Scout to stay close as they moved through the darkened interior. Most rooms stood empty at this hour, with only minimal personnel maintaining operations overnight. This matched Logan's prediction based on observed shift patterns. The primary activity had moved to the mine itself, with the main building serving primarily as living quarters and administrative support. They located the central operations room without encountering any personnel, a stroke of tactical luck Logan knew better than to count on continuing. The room contained multiple computer stations, large topographical displays of the surrounding wilderness, and detailed maps with marked locations throughout the Bitterroot National Forest. Logan moved directly to what appeared to be the primary workstation, finding it locked but still powered. Another application of his electronic bypass tool granted access to the system without triggering security protocols. Years might have passed since his active service, but some skills remained sharply honed. The files Logan discovered confirmed his suspicions while revealing new dimensions of the operation. Northern Resource Initiatives had been systematically dumping toxic mining waste into remote watersheds throughout the region, a cost-saving measure that had increased their profitability while contaminating water sources that eventually fed into major river systems. The documentation included chemical analyses, disposal locations, and most damning of all, internal communications, acknowledging the environmental impact but proceeding regardless. Another folder contained surveillance reports on the wilderness, Emergency Response Training Center, specifically tracking Captain Reynolds's K9 team as they conducted environmental monitoring throughout the national forest. The operation had been watching them for months before the attack, aware that their water testing activities would eventually detect the contamination. "Your handler was gathering evidence," Logan told Scout, who maintained vigilant watch near the door. Environmental crimes significant enough to threaten a billion-dollar corporation. Most concerning were communications between Blackwood and multiple government officials, including Senator Chambers and 2 EPA directors. The correspondence detailed how regulatory investigations had been repeatedly diverted, evidence suppressed, and witnesses pressured into silence. The corruption extended far beyond what Logan had initially suspected. A final folder labeled Phase 2 contained plans for expanded operations, new dumping sites, increased production, and most alarmingly, a section titled Watershed Control that detailed a plan to systematically purchase land containing key water sources throughout the region, effectively privatizing public water access. Logan connected a small storage device to the computer, copying the essential files while continuing to search for information about Captain Reynolds' current situation. A security report filed earlier that day provided the critical intelligence he needed. She was being held in a converted storage chamber within the mine, with plans to permanently resolve the situation following Blackwood's final interrogation. Tomorrow, the report confirmed Logan's worst fears. They intended to eliminate Captain Reynolds once they confirmed she hadn't shared her evidence with outside agencies. The timetable gave Logan less than 12 hours to execute a rescue, a nearly impossible window given the security and environmental challenges of extracting someone from an underground facility. As Logan completed the download and prepared to exit the system, Scout's demeanor changed suddenly, ears forward, body tensing, signaling an approaching threat. Logan immediately closed the computer session, disconnected his device, and moved toward their predetermined emergency position. Behind a large storage cabinet, the door opened seconds later as a security officer entered, yawning as he moved to check the monitoring systems. The man showed no indication of suspecting intruders, simply conducting a routine check before returning to other duties. Nevertheless, his presence created a dangerous complication. He now stood between Logan and Scout and their planned exit route. Logan weighed options quickly. Neutralizing the guard would create immediate advantage, but raise alarms when he failed to report. Waiting carried its own risks, potentially closing their narrow window for undetected departure. Scout looked to Logan for direction, his training keeping him motionless despite the natural instinct to respond to the threat. The decision was made for them when the guard's radio activated. "Johnson, need you at the mine entrance. Equipment malfunction on security door." "Copy that," the guard responded, setting down his coffee mug and heading for the door. "On my way." Logan and Scout remained concealed for a full 60 seconds after the guard's departure before moving toward the exit. The unexpected interruption had cost valuable time but provided additional intelligence. Security at the mine entrance was experiencing technical issues, potentially creating an opportunity. They exited the main building through the same rear door they had entered, timing their movement to coincide with the guard's patrol pattern. The compound remained quiet, with most personnel either asleep or assigned to the mine operations. Logan led Scout toward the mine entrance, maintaining cover behind equipment and supply crates. The situation at the mine entrance confirmed the radio message. 3 security personnel and what appeared to be a technical specialist were working on the electronic door system. Their attention focused entirely on the malfunctioning equipment, creating a temporary gap in perimeter awareness. "Not an opportunity for entry," Logan whispered to Scout, "but valuable intelligence." They retreated to the perimeter using the same careful movement techniques that had gotten them inside, eventually reaching their insertion point without detection. Logan sent Scout through the culvert first, then followed, emerging once again into the relative safety of the wilderness beyond the compound fence. Only when they had put several hundred yards between themselves and the compound did Logan permit a moment of evaluation. The intelligence gathered exceeded his expectations, comprehensive evidence of environmental crimes, political corruption, and confirmation that Captain Reynolds remained alive. However, the rescue parameters had become significantly more challenging with the confirmation of her underground location and the accelerated timeline for her elimination. "We've got the evidence," Logan told Scout as they made their way back to their contingency cache. "But that's not enough, is it? Not for you." Scout's unwavering attention confirmed what Logan already knew. The dog's absolute priority remained his handler's safety. The evidence might eventually bring down Northern Resource Initiatives and expose corrupt officials, but justice served after Captain Reynolds' death would be hollow victory at best. Logan retrieved his satellite phone from the cache, weighing his next move carefully. Standard protocol would dictate withdrawing with the evidence, delivering it to trustworthy authorities, and allowing a properly equipped team to handle the rescue operation. But the timeline made such an approach impossible. By the time a team could be assembled and deployed, Captain Reynolds would be dead. "Sometimes you have to break protocol," Logan murmured, remembering the words of his first commanding officer. "When the mission demands it, when lives depend on it, when doing it by the book means certain failure." He dialed Wilson's number, keeping his voice low despite the distance from the compound. "I've got evidence," Logan said when Wilson answered. "Comprehensive documentation of environmental crimes, corporate corruption, political protection. It's bigger than we thought." "Where are you?" Wilson asked, concern evident in his voice. "Still on site. They're holding Captain Reynolds underground in the mine, planning to eliminate her tomorrow after final interrogation." A long pause followed. "Logan, you need to withdraw. Bring the evidence out. I've got contacts who can move quickly once they have proof." "Not quickly enough," Logan countered. "Timeline's too short. You're considering a solo rescue operation against an entire security team. That's suicide, even for someone with your background." "Not solo," Logan replied, glancing at Scout. "I've got specialized assistance." Another pause. "What do you need from me?" "Two things. First, I'm sending you the evidence now as insurance. If you don't hear from me by 0900 tomorrow, release it to every agency and news outlet on your contact list." "Done. And second, I need a very specific distraction. Here's what I'm thinking." Logan outlined his plan. Audacious, dangerous, with countless potential failure points, but with just enough tactical soundness to be possible. When he finished, Wilson's response was measured. "That's insane," Wilson said finally. "But I don't see a better option given the timeline. I'll make the calls. Be in position by 0500. The connection ended, leaving Logan and Scout alone in the darkness with a rescue plan that walked the razor's edge between desperate courage and tactical suicide. Logan checked his weapons and remaining supplies, calculating resources against requirements, and finding the margin thinner than he'd prefer. "Get some rest," he told Scout, creating a small sheltered space beneath a rocky overhang. "Tomorrow's going to demand everything we've got." Scout settled beside him, alert even in his apparent rest. Logan knew the dog understood the stakes, not in human terms of evidence and justice, but in the most fundamental way. His handler, his partner, remained in danger, and every fiber of his being was committed to her rescue. As the mountain, night deepened around them, Logan Hayes confronted the reality of what he'd committed to, risking his life for a woman he'd never met, against a powerful organization with resources and personnel far exceeding his own. The rational calculation suggested near certain failure. Yet as Scout pressed against his side, embodying loyalty and purpose in their purest forms, Logan recognized something he'd lost during his years of self-imposed isolation. Some missions transcended rational calculation. Some causes demanded action, regardless of odds. Some principles were worth the ultimate risk. Tomorrow would determine whether courage and skill could overcome overwhelming disadvantage. But tonight, in the darkness of the Montana wilderness, Logan had already won a significant victory over the emptiness and disconnection that had defined his existence since leaving the Rangers. Whatever happened at dawn, he was fully alive again, fully present, fully committed to something beyond mere survival. That, Logan reflected as he prepared himself mentally for what was to come, might be enough. Dawn was still 2 hours away. When Logan began final preparations for the rescue operation, the mountain air carried a bone-deep chill that penetrated even his specialized gear, a reminder of the harsh environment that had both isolated and protected him these past 3 years. Now, that same environment would become an element of his tactical approach. Advantage of mountain operations, Logan told Scout as they assembled the minimal equipment required, is that nature itself becomes part of your arsenal. Terrain, weather, visibility, all force multipliers when properly utilized. The plan Logan had developed with Wilson's assistance balanced audacity with precision timing. Under normal circumstances, a solo extraction from a fortified underground facility would be classified as a suicide mission. But Logan had identified 3 critical vulnerabilities in the operation's security structure that, when exploited simultaneously, might create sufficient chaos to enable a successful rescue. First, the mine's ventilation system extended to several surface locations beyond the main perimeter, providing alternative access points too narrow for human infiltration, but potentially navigable by a highly trained military dog. Second, the security forces, while professional, operated with the overconfidence typical of units facing no anticipated opposition. Their night shift demonstrated reduced vigilance, with predictable patterns and response protocols. Third, the operation's remote location, initially its greatest security advantage, created significant vulnerability if external communications were disrupted. The satellite uplink represented a single point of failure for their command and control structure. Logan checked his watch. 0415 hours. Wilson's distraction was scheduled for 0500, giving them just enough time to reach their initial position. He secured his tactical vest, containing only essential equipment: sidearm with suppressor, combat knife, compact breaching tools, and the small but critical electronic package Wilson had helped him prepare remotely. Final equipment check, Logan told Scout, who stood attentively beside him. Logan removed a specialized vest from his pack, similar to Scout's standard tactical gear, but modified with additional features. This might feel slightly different than your usual equipment. The vest contained a miniaturized camera with transmitter, allowing Logan to receive visual feed from Scout's perspective once they separated. Additionally, small pouches contained specialized tools Scout had been trained to retrieve and deliver. On command, the modifications added minimal weight while maximizing the dog's operational capability. Scout allowed Logan to secure the equipment without resistance, the dog's trust apparently extending to these unfamiliar additions. Once the vest was properly positioned, Logan conducted a brief systems check, confirming the camera's functionality and transmission range. "Good to go," Logan confirmed, giving Scout a final pat before shouldering his own minimal pack. "Let's move." They approached the compound from the north, a different vector than their previous infiltration. This approach utilized a steep ravine that security patrols avoided due to the difficult terrain. The challenging descent required Logan to use climbing techniques at several points, with Scout navigating the natural pathways with impressive agility. By 0455, they had reached their initial position, a natural overlook that provided sight lines to both the main compound and the ventilation shaft Logan had identified as Scout's entry point. Logan established his communication equipment, positioning the small directional antenna toward the emergency response station 20 miles away, where Wilson had arranged their distraction. 5 minutes, Logan whispered, both to himself and Scout. Remember, timing is everything. Precisely at 0500, the silence of the mountain morning shattered as emergency sirens activated throughout the compound. Through his binoculars, Logan observed the predictable response. Security personnel emerging from buildings, taking defensive positions, radio communications spiking as they attempted to identify the threat. Seconds later, their satellite communications array pivoted automatically, seeking connection with emergency response systems. This automatic protocol, responding to the false chemical spill alert Wilson had triggered through his regional emergency management contacts, created the exact vulnerability Logan had anticipated. As the array adjusted position, Logan activated the small electronic device he had prepared. The focused electromagnetic pulse wasn't powerful enough to damage equipment permanently, but created sufficient interference to disrupt satellite communications. Temporarily, combined with the jamming frequency now broadcasting from Wilson's position, the compound was effectively cut off from external communication. Confusion visibly spread through the security team as multiple systems failed simultaneously. Their training directed them towards standard defensive protocols, concentrating forces around principal assets, the main building and mine entrance, while dispatching teams to assess the perimeter. "That's our window," Logan told Scout. 30 minutes at most before they establish alternative communications and recognize the deception. They moved quickly to the ventilation shaft, a reinforced metal tube approximately 2 feet in diameter that extended from the underground facility to the surface, partially concealed by natural rock formations outside the main perimeter. As anticipated, the security response had drawn personnel away from this secondary structure, leaving it temporarily unmonitored. Logan removed the protective grating using compact breaching tools, creating an opening that Scout could navigate. The shaft descended at an approximately 30-degree angle for the first 20 yards before connecting to the main ventilation system. A tight fit even for a dog of Scout's size, but viable based on Logan's assessment of the facility schematics. "Find Captain Reynolds," Logan instructed, securing a small transmitter to Scout's vest. "I'll track your position and create the primary distraction once you've located her." Scout looked at Logan with an intensity that transcended normal animal intelligence, a silent communication passing between them that reflected their rapidly formed but profound partnership. Then, without hesitation, the dog entered the shaft, disappearing into the darkness with focused purpose. Logan immediately repositioned to his secondary location, a concealed approach to the mine's main entrance. The small receiver in his tactical vest displayed Scout's progress through the underground facility, transmitted from the camera in the dog's vest. The image quality was limited and occasionally disrupted, but sufficient to track Scout's movement through the ventilation system and into the main mine structure. The security team's response continued to follow predictable patterns. Perimeter teams finding no external threat, communications specialists attempting to restore satellite connections, and the security leader dispatching additional personnel to protect high-value areas, including the prisoner-holding area. This final element worked to Logan's advantage. As more security personnel concentrated around Captain Reynolds' location, they created the precise concentration of force that his distraction was designed to disperse. Scout navigated the ventilation system with remarkable precision, eventually emerging into an unused storage area. From there, the dog moved through the facility with the stealth his breed was known for, using shadows and structural elements for concealment while following the scent of his handler. Logan watched the transmitted images with professional appreciation. Scout's training was exceptional, his movement through the hostile environment demonstrating the elite capability that specialized military K9 units developed. Within 12 minutes of entry, Scout had located the converted storage chamber where Captain Reynolds was being held. The camera feed showed a reinforced door with electronic lock guarded by 2 armed security personnel. Beyond this immediate security, 3 additional guards patrolled the connecting corridor. Captain Reynolds was visible through a small observation window, alive but restrained to a chair, showing signs of rough treatment but no critical injuries. Located, Logan confirmed quietly, shifting to the operational phase of the rescue. Hold position. Logan moved toward the mine entrance, timing his approach to coincide with the security team's increasing frustration over their communications failure. The main entrance featured 2 guards, both visibly distracted by the ongoing situation, their attention divided between their assigned position and the chaos unfolding around them. Using the natural cover provided by equipment and supply crates, Logan approached to within 30 yards of the entrance. From this position, he removed the final element of his distraction package, a small but sophisticated device that would override the mine's environmental alarm systems. The mining operation, despite its illegal toxic waste disposal, maintained standard safety protocols for underground operations, including sensors for hazardous gas detection. Logan's device would trigger these systems, creating a facility-wide evacuation protocol that security personnel were trained to prioritize above all other concerns, including prisoner supervision. Logan activated the device, then immediately repositioned to his breach entry point, a maintenance access located 50 yards east of the main entrance, identified during his earlier reconnaissance. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Alarm systems throughout the facility activated, emergency lighting shifted to red evacuation indicators, and automated announcements began directing all personnel to designated safety points. The security team responded exactly as their training dictated. Evacuation procedures took precedence, with teams moving to ensure all personnel exited the underground facility. Through Scout's camera feed, Logan observed the guards at Captain Reynolds' cell, responding to the alarm. Their training created an immediate dilemma. Standard protocol required evacuating all personnel, including prisoners, yet their specific orders were to ensure Captain Reynolds remained secured. The security leader made the decision Logan had anticipated, ordering one guard to remain with the prisoner while the others assisted with general evacuation. This reduced the immediate security presence from 5 to 1, the most favorable scenario Logan could have hoped for. Now, Logan whispered into his communication device, the signal transmitting to Scout's specialized vest. On receiving the command, Scout executed his trained response, moving from concealment to create a strategic distraction. The dog barked sharply, then retreated down the corridor, drawing the attention of the remaining guard away from the cell door. The guard, surprised by the unexpected presence of a dog in the secure facility, made the critical error of leaving his position to investigate. Once the guard moved sufficient distance from the cell door, Scout led him on a brief pursuit before disappearing into a side passage. Meanwhile, Logan had breached the maintenance access, entering the facility during the height of evacuation confusion. Using the building schematics memorized during preparation, he navigated through service corridors toward Captain Reynolds' position, encountering minimal resistance as most personnel focused on reaching designated evacuation points. The remaining security around the detention area had been reduced to the single guard now pursuing Scout, exactly the scenario Logan had engineered. He reached the cell door undetected, applying his electronic bypass tool to the locking mechanism. The device required 15 crucial seconds to override the system, during which Logan remained completely exposed should any security personnel return. The lock disengaged with a metallic click that seemed unnaturally loud despite the ongoing alarm systems. Logan entered the cell, finding Captain Maya Reynolds attempting to free herself from restraints despite her obvious injuries. She looked up at his entrance, her expression shifting from determination to confusion. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, no fear in her voice despite her vulnerable position. "Logan Hayes," he replied, moving quickly to release her restraints. "I'm here with Scout." The mention of her dog's name transformed her expression. Instantly, "Scout's alive? How did you—" "He found me," Logan interrupted, completing her liberation from the chair. "Can you walk?" Captain Reynolds stood shakily but with determination. "I can do whatever's necessary to get out of here. Where's Scout?" As if summoned by her question, Scout appeared in the doorway, having successfully evaded the guard and doubled back to their position. The reunion between handler and dog transcended the urgency of their situation. Scout pressing against his handler with palpable relief, while Captain Reynolds knelt briefly despite her injuries, embracing the dog with unconcealed emotion. "Later," Logan said gently but firmly. "We've got approximately 4 minutes before they realize the environmental alarm is false and implement secondary security protocols." Captain Reynolds nodded, instantly shifting back to operational focus. "Lead the way, Scout and I will follow." They moved through the facility using the evacuation confusion as cover, Logan navigating toward the maintenance access point while Captain Reynolds and Scout provided rear security. They encountered 2 security personnel en route but avoided detection by utilizing alternative corridors Logan had identified during planning. The maintenance access provided their exit from the underground facility, emerging into the external compound where evacuation protocols had created precisely the distraction Logan had envisioned. Personnel gathered at designated safety points, accountability checks underway, attention focused entirely on the perceived environmental threat rather than potential infiltration. "Perimeter is 40 yards ahead," Logan whispered as they utilized equipment staging areas for concealment. "Same. Drainage culvert I used for entry. Once clear, we move directly to extraction point Alpha." Captain Reynolds nodded her understanding, her professional composure remarkable given her recent captivity. Scout remained at her side, the dog's alertness providing additional security as they navigated the final yards to the perimeter. The drainage culvert proved more challenging with Captain Reynolds' injuries, but she managed the tight space with determined efficiency. Logan followed, securing the perimeter behind them. Once clear of the immediate compound, they increased pace, putting maximum distance between themselves and the facility before the inevitable discovery of the captain's absence. 500 meters to Rally Point, Logan confirmed as they moved. Through the forested terrain, Wilson has transportation arranged from there. Captain Reynolds matched his pace, despite visible discomfort. "Your timing was impeccable," she noted. "They planned to eliminate me this morning after Blackwood's final interrogation." "I know," Logan replied. "But more importantly, I've secured evidence of everything. The environmental crimes, the political protection, all of it. Wilson's already establishing secure channels for dissemination if we don't make the checkpoint." For the first time, genuine hope appeared in Captain Reynolds' expression. "Then regardless of what happens to us, the truth gets out. They don't walk away clean." "That's the idea," Logan confirmed as they approached the rally point, a natural clearing suitable for helicopter extraction. "But personally, I prefer the version where we deliver the evidence ourselves." As if responding to his statement, the distinctive sound of rotors became audible in the distance, Wilson's extraction team arriving precisely on schedule. The operation, against all probability, had succeeded. They had rescued Captain Reynolds, secured critical evidence, and would soon be beyond Northern Resource Initiative's reach. As the helicopter appeared above the tree line, Logan allowed himself a moment of recognition. The mission clarity he had experienced throughout this operation had awakened something he'd thought permanently lost during his years of isolation. Purpose, connection, the satisfaction of applying specialized skills towards something that genuinely mattered. Scout stood between Logan and Captain Reynolds, alert, but visibly content now that his handler was safe. The dog's unwavering dedication had initiated this entire sequence of events, his refusal to abandon his handler, his determination to find help against impossible odds, his trust in a stranger who might have turned him away. The helicopter descended toward the clearing, representing not just extraction, but vindication, proof that even against overwhelming odds, courage and principle could prevail. Logan Hayes, who had retreated from the world believing he no longer had a place in it, had found perhaps not a permanent role, but at least a momentary one, where his unique capabilities made all the difference. That, he reflected as they prepared to board, might be enough to build upon. The helicopter lifted off from the clearing with practiced precision, banking sharply to maintain the lowest possible profile against the mountain ridgeline. Inside, Captain Maya Reynolds received immediate medical attention from a combat medic. Wilson had included in the extraction team a former Army specialist who assessed her injuries with professional efficiency. Dehydration, mild concussion, 2 cracked ribs, various contusions, the medic reported after completing his examination. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but you'll need proper medical evaluation once we reach secure territory. Captain Reynolds acknowledged this assessment with a nod, her attention divided between her physical condition and the tactical situation. "How far is our safe zone?" she asked, directing the question to Wilson, who sat across from her monitoring communications. 40 minutes to the reservation, Wilson replied. Blackfeet tribal land. We have arrangements with their Environmental Protection Office. They've been conducting independent water testing that corroborates your findings. Tribal sovereignty gives us temporary protection from federal interference. Logan, seated near the helicopter's side door where he could maintain visual security, noted the strategic wisdom in Wilson's choice of safe haven. Tribal jurisdictions created legal complexities that would slow any potential pursuit, providing critical time for evidence processing and distribution. Northern Resource will realize what happened within the hour, Logan observed. They'll activate every resource available, including their political assets. Wilson nodded grimly, already witnessing the initial response. Emergency communications. From Senator Chambers' office to 3 federal agencies. They're constructing a narrative, identifying you as an eco-terrorist, Captain Reynolds as your accomplice, the entire rescue characterized as a violent attack on legitimate business operations. Standard playbook, Captain Reynolds commented, wincing slightly as the helicopter encountered turbulence. Discredit the whistleblowers, control the narrative, deploy legal and political shields. Except this time, Logan noted, we have comprehensive evidence of their criminal activities, their political corruption, and now their illegal detention and attempted murder of federal personnel. Scout lay protectively beside Captain Reynolds, the dog's alertness undiminished despite the successful extraction. His tactical vest still contained the camera system that had proven instrumental in coordinating the rescue. Logan reached over to disconnect the equipment, removing the specialized gear and returning Scout to his standard tactical vest. Your dog is exceptional, Logan told Captain Reynolds, genuine admiration in his voice. Best K9 operator I've worked including Special Forces units in Afghanistan. Captain Reynolds smiled despite her injuries, running her hand along Scout's side. He was identified early as having unique capabilities. Most military dogs excel at specific tasks: detection, apprehension, tracking. Scout demonstrated unprecedented integration of multiple skill sets alongside problem-solving abilities that defied standard training parameters. He found me in the deep wilderness, tracked back through miles of rugged terrain, and communicated complex needs despite no prior interaction, Logan observed. That goes beyond training. The bond matters, Captain Reynolds explained, her expression softening when she looked at Scout. The handler K9 relationship creates possibilities beyond mechanical training. Scout isn't following programming, he's exercising judgment, making decisions, applying his capabilities toward objectives he genuinely understands. The conversation paused as Wilson received updated information through his secure communications channel. His expression tightened as he processed the incoming data. Situation escalating faster than anticipated, he reported. Blackwood has direct line to the Attorney General's office. Federal warrants being prepared. They're characterizing this as domestic terrorism with environmental extremist motivations. They're desperate, Captain Reynolds noted. Overplaying. Their hand reveals their vulnerability. Logan considered the tactical implications. How solid is our position on the reservation? Tribal Chairman Cameron is personally involved, Wilson replied. Their legal team is prepared for federal pressure. We have perhaps 24 hours of relative security, enough time to process the evidence and initiate distribution through multiple channels. The helicopter began its descent toward a small clearing where 3 vehicles waited, tribal police and environmental protection officers providing secure reception. The pilot executed a textbook tactical landing, minimizing ground time, while the transfer occurred with practiced efficiency. Captain Reynolds, Scout, Logan, and Wilson were quickly loaded into the central vehicle, a tribal police SUV with official markings that would deter casual interference. The remaining extraction team dispersed to secondary vehicles, creating multiple potential targets should pursuit develop. As they drove toward the Tribal Environmental Center, Wilson provided additional context about their temporary sanctuary. Chairman Cameron has personal investment in this situation. His community has documented increased cancer rates, respiratory issues, and livestock deaths over the past 3 years, all correlating with watershed contamination from northern resource operations upstream from tribal lands. My team identified elevated heavy metal concentrations and industrial chemical compounds at 12 collection points on national forest land, Captain Reynolds confirmed. The contamination profile matched known byproducts from Northern Resources' extraction processes. When our findings began showing contamination migration into watershed systems that feed tribal lands, the corporate response escalated dramatically. They targeted your entire operation, Logan observed. Not just data elimination, but complete removal of all personnel who had knowledge of the findings. Captain Reynolds nodded grimly. The attack came without warning. Professional team, military precision. They breached our security systems simultaneously at multiple points, neutralized our communications, and systematically eliminated resistance. Her voice tightened with controlled emotion. We lost 7 team members in the initial assault. Scout and I were conducting field testing 5 miles from the facility. When we returned and found the destruction, she paused, composing herself, before continuing. Scout tracked the attackers initially, but when we realized the scale of the operation, I sent him to find help while I attempted to gather surviving evidence. I underestimated their perimeter security. You made the right tactical decision, Logan assured her. Scout found me because you prioritized the mission over your personal safety. The evidence reaches the public because of that choice. Hi, the convoy arrived at the Tribal Environmental Center, a modern facility that belied stereotypical expectations of reservation infrastructure. Chairman Cameron himself waited at the entrance, accompanied by tribal council members and environmental science staff. Captain Reynolds, the chairman, greeted her, his dignified presence commanding natural respect. Your courage honors us. The Blackfeet Nation stands with you against those who poison our sacred waters. The next several hours unfolded with focused intensity. The evidence Logan had secured was transferred to the Tribal Environmental Center's secure systems, where a team of legal experts and environmental scientists began processing the material for maximum impact and defensibility. Captain Reynolds received proper medical attention while simultaneously providing detailed testimony, correlating the new evidence with her team's original findings. Scout remained constantly at her side, the dog's protective vigilance undiminished. Despite their relatively secure location, Logan worked with Wilson and tribal security to establish defensive protocols, anticipating potential escalation as Northern Resource and their political allies responded to the situation. The tribal police, many with military backgrounds, implemented Logan's recommendations with professional precision, creating multiple security layers around the environmental center. By late afternoon, the first phase of evidence processing was complete. Chairman Cameron called them together for a strategic assessment in the center's main conference room. We've prepared information packages for simultaneous distribution to 17 independent news organizations, 4 international environmental protection agencies, and 3 congressional oversight committees known to oppose Senator Chambers, the chairman reported. Additionally, our legal team has filed emergency injunctions in 3 separate jurisdictions, creating procedural obstacles that will delay any federal enforcement actions against tribal sovereignty. What about Northern Resources' immediate response capability? Logan asked, his tactical mindset focused on short-term security concerns. Our surveillance indicates multiple private security contractors approaching tribal boundaries, the chairman acknowledged. However, they're maintaining distance, likely awaiting federal authorization before risking direct violation of sovereign territory. Wilson added his assessment. They're pursuing legal and political solutions first, attempting to secure federal warrants that would compel tribal cooperation. Senator Chambers is reportedly in direct communication with the Department of the Interior, pressuring for intervention. Captain Reynolds, despite her injuries and evident fatigue, maintained remarkable clarity as she evaluated their position. The evidence distribution is our primary objective. Once that's secured, individual safety becomes secondary. The evidence packages deploy in 6 hours, Chairman Cameron confirmed. Our technical team established deadman protocols. If our systems detect security breach or communication interruption, all packages deploy immediately. There is no scenario where this information remains contained. Logan recognized the strategic soundness of these arrangements, but something continued to trouble him about Northern Resources' response pattern. Their actions suggested desperation beyond what even this damaging evidence would justify. Corporate, environmental crimes, while serious, typically resulted in fines and consent decrees rather than existential threats to the organization itself. There's something we're missing, Logan observed. Their reaction is disproportionate to standard environmental violations, regardless of scale. They're behaving as if this threatens something beyond corporate liability or executive culpability. Captain Reynolds considered this assessment. My team's final testing focused on water samples from the northern tributary of Carson Creek, an area where we detected particularly high contamination levels. The analysis was incomplete when the attack occurred, but preliminary findings showed unusual radiation signatures alongside the expected chemical contaminants. Udine, this new information shifted the entire context of Northern Resources operations. Logan, Wilson and Chairman Cameron exchanged concerned glances as they processed the implications. You believe they're disposing of radioactive material without proper containment or documentation, Chairman Cameron stated, the gravity of this possibility evident in his voice. It would explain their extreme response, Wilson agreed. Environmental violations become potential national security concerns if radioactive waste is involved. Different agencies, different penalties, different level of political exposure. Captain Reynolds nodded. The radiation signatures were distinctive but unidentified in our standard databases. My team leader had forwarded the preliminary findings to a specialist at the Department of Energy for identification when the attack occurred. Logan's tactical assessment immediately adjusted to this new information. If radioactive material is involved, Northern Resources leadership faces potential criminal charges that no political connection can shield them from. They're not just protecting corporate interests, they're fighting for personal freedom. Which makes them infinitely more dangerous, Wilson concluded. Desperate people take desperate actions. Chairman Cameron absorbed this development with the measured consideration of a seasoned leader. This information must be included in our evidence distribution. The radiation angle elevates this beyond environmental crime to potential domestic terrorism. As the team processed this revelation, Logan stepped away briefly, moving to the facility's perimeter where he could assess security positions and consider tactical implications. The mountain landscape stretched before him, the same wilderness that had provided him refuge from a world he no longer understood, now represented the battleground for a conflict with profound implications. Scout joined him at the perimeter, the dog seemingly sensing Logan's need for momentary solitude to process the evolving situation. They stood together in companionable silence, surveying the natural beauty that masked the contamination spreading through its watersheds. Your handler is remarkable, Logan told Scout quietly. The kind of person who makes the system work the way it's supposed to. Principled, dedicated, willing to risk everything for what's right. Scout's attentive posture suggested an understanding beyond normal animal comprehension. A connection to Logan's words that transcended conventional communication barriers. I withdrew from all this, Logan continued, gesturing toward the human systems and conflicts beyond the wilderness, decided the world had become too compromised, too corrupted, to deserve my participation. He paused, considering how completely his perspective had transformed in mere days. But hiding from corruption only creates space for it to spread unchallenged. The sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the reservation land. Within hours, the evidence would deploy across multiple channels, initiating a cascade of revelations that would likely dominate national attention for months to come. Corporate executives would face criminal charges, political careers would end in disgrace, and environmental remediation would begin for the contaminated watersheds. Yet the more immediate concern remained their security during the crucial hours. Before the evidence reached its destinations, Northern Resource and their allies would take increasingly desperate measures to prevent the information from deploying. The relative protection of tribal sovereignty would face escalating challenges from multiple directions. Logan returned to the Environmental Center, where Captain Reynolds had established an improvised command post coordinating security preparations with tribal police and Wilson's contacts. Despite her injuries and the ordeal of captivity, she exhibited the calm competence of a natural leader managing crisis conditions. Security assessment? She asked as Logan entered, acknowledging his expertise without ego or territorial concern. Perimeter is well established but undermanned for sustained Defense, Logan reported honestly. Tribal police have good positioning, but limited tactical equipment for paramilitary threat response. Captain Reynolds nodded, having reached similar conclusions. We've received intelligence that Northern Resource has deployed 3 additional security teams, positioning for potential multiple vector approach. They're maintaining legal pretense for now, but indicators suggest they're preparing contingencies that disregard jurisdictional constraints. 6 hours until information deployment, Logan noted. They'll calculate risk-reward ratios and likely determine that short-term legal consequences of sovereignty violation are preferable to the guaranteed outcomes of evidence release. Agreed, Captain Reynolds replied. Recommendation. The simple question acknowledged Logan's tactical expertise while respecting the command structure, a professional courtesy that reflected Captain Reynolds's leadership quality. Logan found himself responding to her approach with the same focused clarity he had once provided to his Ranger command. Distributed defense with mobile response capability, he suggested. Visible perimeter presence creates deterrence, while mobile teams provide rapid reinforcement at any breach point. Simultaneously, we prepare fallback positions, protecting the core technical systems until deployment completion. Captain Reynolds nodded approval. Implementation priority? Technical system redundancy first. Ensure multiple deployment pathways even if primary systems are compromised. Secondary priority to evacuation protocols for key personnel if perimeter breach occurs. Tactical resistance sufficient only to ensure these primary objectives. Indeed, the strategy reflected their fundamental reality. They couldn't hope to defeat a determined paramilitary assault indefinitely, but they didn't need to. They only needed to maintain system integrity long enough for the evidence to deploy, or trigger the deadman protocols that would initiate immediate distribution. As they refined the security preparations, Logan found himself experiencing something he had abandoned years ago: the profound satisfaction of applying specialized skills within a team committed to meaningful purpose. His self-imposed isolation had provided escape from a world he couldn't reconcile with his values, but it had denied him the essential human experience of contribution within community. Scout remained close to both Logan and Captain Reynolds, the dog's extraordinary intuition allowing him to assist where needed while maintaining his protective vigilance. The bond between Scout and his handler provided continuous reaffirmation of the principle that had initiated this entire sequence of events: that loyalty and courage, properly directed, could stand effectively against systems of corruption and power. As darkness settled over the reservation, Logan positioned himself at a key observation point, prepared for what promised to be the most challenging night since his return from combat deployment. The stakes extended far beyond personal safety. The evidence they protected represented accountability for environmental crimes affecting thousands of lives and ecosystems spanning multiple watersheds. Worth coming out of retirement for, Logan murmured to himself as he scanned the perimeter, finding unexpected peace in renewed purpose. Whatever the coming hours might bring, he had already received something invaluable: the rediscovery of his capacity to make a difference when principles demanded action. Darkness transformed the Blackfeet Reservation's environmental center into an island of light amid the vast Montana wilderness. Logan's military experience had taught him that nightfall fundamentally alters tactical scenarios. Advantages shift, vulnerabilities change, and psychological factors intensify. As he completed his final perimeter assessment, he noted both strengths and concerning weaknesses in their defensive position. The tribal police had established effective observation posts at logical approach vectors, their personnel demonstrating professional discipline despite limited tactical training. Chairman Cameron had authorized deployment of the tribe's emergency response teams, adding 20 qualified marksmen with intimate knowledge of the surrounding terrain. Wilson's contacts had delivered additional equipment, communications gear, night vision capabilities, and defensive supplies that significantly enhanced their operational effectiveness. Logan returned to the command center, where Captain Reynolds was reviewing satellite imagery with Wilson and the tribal security chief, identifying potential helicopter landing zones that might facilitate rapid assault by Northern Resource operatives. Perimeter report, Captain Reynolds requested as Logan entered, her focus unwavering despite the medical officer's repeated recommendations for rest. Three-layer defense established, Logan reported, moving to the tactical display. Observation posts here, and here provide early warning. Response teams positioned at these 5 points enable rapid reinforcement to any sector. Technical, systems secured with redundant power and communication pathways. Chairman Cameron studied the defensive arrangement with approval. Our people know this land intimately. Even specialized forces will find night navigation challenging in this terrain. We've intercepted communications, suggesting they're bringing in additional assets, Wilson added, reviewing the latest intelligence. Private security contractors, with military backgrounds, operating under the cover of environmental compliance inspection teams. Captain Reynolds absorbed this information with the calm assessment of an experienced officer. Estimated timeline: 2 to 3 hours minimum before they could establish forward positions, Wilson calculated. Their current posture suggests they're awaiting formal documentation, likely emergency warrants being processed through judicial channels sympathetic to Senator Chambers. They'll emphasize legal pretense until the last possible moment, Logan noted. Once they commit to direct action, they cross a line that even political protection can't entirely shield. Scout, who had remained attentive beside Captain Reynolds, suddenly raised his head, ears pivoting forward with focused attention. Both Logan and Captain Reynolds immediately recognized the behavior. The dog had detected something beyond human perception. Scout has something, Captain Reynolds stated, instantly alert. Direction? Logan watched as Scout moved purposefully toward the eastern perimeter, his posture indicating detection rather than immediate threat. Captain Reynolds followed, with Logan accompanying them to the facility's eastern entrance, where Scout's behavior became more pronounced, not aggression or alarm, but clear indication of approaching personnel. Logan activated his night vision equipment, scanning the eastern approach. Initially, he detected nothing unusual, but Scout's continuing focus prompted more careful examination of the tree line approximately 200 yards from their position. Movement, Logan confirmed. Single individual non-tactical approach. Appears to be injured or exhausted. Captain Reynolds made an immediate tactical decision. Wilson, alert eastern perimeter team. Potential approach, unknown intent. Maintain defensive posture but withhold engagement. Logan, Scout and I will investigate. The three of them moved toward the approaching figure, maintaining appropriate tactical spacing while using available cover. Scout led the way, his behavior suggesting recognition rather than threat assessment. As they closed distance, the figure resolved into clearer focus, a woman in her 30s, wearing tattered tactical clothing similar to Captain Reynolds, moving with the determined but labored pace of someone pushing beyond physical limits. Captain Reynolds froze momentarily, recognition dawning. Lisa Cortez? The approaching woman stumbled at the sound of her name, then spotted them in the darkness. Maya? Oh, thank God. Captain Reynolds rushed forward, Logan maintaining protective position as she reached the woman, supporting her as she nearly collapsed from apparent exhaustion. She's one of my team, Captain Reynolds explained urgently. Wilderness response specialist. I thought everyone at the facility had been killed in the attack. Field assignment, Lisa managed between labored breaths. Return to destruction. Track them to the mine. Been hiding. Monitoring. 3 days. Logan helped Captain Reynolds support Lisa as they returned to the environmental center, where medical staff immediately began treatment for dehydration, exposure, and exhaustion. Despite her condition, Lisa insisted on sharing critical information. "They're moving something from the mine," she reported as fluids were administered intravenously. "Something they're desperate to remove before authorities might investigate. Heavy security, specialized containment protocols. I couldn't get close enough to identify, but they're using lead-lined transport containers." This confirmation of radioactive materials aligned with Captain Reynolds' earlier theory, but added urgent new dimensions to the threat assessment. Logan, Wilson, and Captain Reynolds stepped aside to evaluate the implications. "If they're evacuating radioactive materials," Wilson reasoned, "they're abandoning the site, preparing for the evidence to go public by removing the most damning physical elements. Or preparing something more drastic," Logan suggested grimly. "Contaminated sites sometimes get accidentally destroyed once extraction operations are complete. Fire, structural collapse, toxic release, incident types that justify hazardous materials protocols that limit investigation." Captain Reynolds processed these possibilities with heightened concern. Either scenario accelerates their timeline. They'll move with increased urgency once they confirm Lisa's presence here. Evidence of another survivor with direct observation of their current operations. "How does this change our defensive strategy?" Chairman Cameron asked, joining their discussion. Logan considered the tactical implications. "They now face dual pressure. Prevent our evidence release and complete their material evacuation before potential federal response. Their most logical approach becomes overwhelming force, applied to multiple points simultaneously. They'll bring everything they have," Captain Reynolds agreed, no longer concerned with maintaining plausible deniability once they commit to action. This assessment necessitated immediate revision to their defensive preparation. Logan worked with the tribal security chief to reposition their limited personnel, prioritizing protection of the technical systems that would distribute evidence packages. 3 hours until scheduled deployment, Wilson reminded them, checking the secure servers that maintained their distribution protocols. "Deadman switches remain active. Any interruption to our systems triggers immediate release." Lisa's arrival had provided valuable intelligence, but also confirmed their most concerning theories about Northern Resources operations. The presence of improperly handled radioactive material elevated the situation from environmental crime to potential public health disaster affecting multiple communities downstream from contaminated watersheds. As their defensive preparations continued, Logan found himself partnered with Captain Reynolds at the facility's most vulnerable access point, the northern approach, where terrain features created natural concealment for potential assault teams. Scout maintained position between them, his extraordinary senses providing early warning capability beyond technical means. "Your dog hasn't rested since we arrived," Logan observed, noting Scout's continued vigilance despite the events of recent days. "He'll maintain operational status until specifically released," Captain Reynolds explained. "It's both training and personal dedication. Once we're secure, he'll finally stand down." Logan recognized in Scout the same unflagging commitment he had witnessed in elite human operators, the capacity to push beyond normal limitations when mission parameters demanded it. That such dedication existed in K9 form seemed simultaneously extraordinary and perfectly natural. "How did you find him?" Logan asked, maintaining visual security of their sector, while conversation helped manage the tension of anticipated conflict. "I didn't," Captain Reynolds replied with evident fondness. "He found me during evaluation for military working dog. candidates, Scout escaped his handler and approached me directly, something strictly against protocol. But he demonstrated such focused intention that the program director allowed an unscheduled assessment. She smiled at the memory. He outperformed every standard metric by significant margins, but only when working with me. With other handlers, he was merely above average. The connection matters, Logan noted, echoing her earlier observation. More than most military programs acknowledge, she agreed. The bond between handler and dog transcends operational parameters. Scout isn't simply following commands, he's participating in shared purpose with comprehensive understanding. Their conversation paused as Scout suddenly tensed, his attention fixed on a position approximately 300 yards northwest of their location. Both Logan and Captain Reynolds immediately shifted to heightened alert, utilizing night vision to scan the indicated direction. "Movement," Logan confirmed. "Multiple personnel, tactical formation, approaching using terrain features for concealment." Captain Reynolds activated her communications device. "Command North Team. Confirmed approach northwest vector, approximately 8 to 10 individuals using tactical movement. Request reinforcement." "Copy North Team," came Wilson's response. "Reinforcement en route. Maintain observation. Avoid engagement unless directly threatened." The approaching team continued their advance, demonstrating professional discipline in their movement techniques. Logan recognized the formation patterns from his military experience. These weren't standard security contractors, but specialized operators with advanced tactical training. "Former Special Operations," Logan assessed quietly. "Movement discipline. Indicates military background. These aren't corporate security, they're private military contractors." Captain Reynolds nodded agreement. "Northern Resource escalated to their most capable assets." The approaching team halted approximately 200 yards from the perimeter, establishing positions that suggested reconnaissance rather than immediate assault. Their disciplined patience indicated sophisticated operational planning, gathering intelligence before committing to action. "They're evaluating our defensive positions," Logan noted, "identifying weaknesses before coordinating with other potential approach vectors." As if confirming his assessment, Wilson's voice came through. "Their communication system. All teams, be advised. Similar approach formations identified at southeast and western perimeters. Pattern suggests coordinated reconnaissance prior to potential synchronized assault." The tactical situation had developed exactly as Logan had anticipated. Northern Resource had deployed multiple specialized teams, positioning for simultaneous assault from different directions to overwhelm their limited defensive resources. The coming confrontation would test their preparation, discipline, and determination against superior numbers and equipment. Captain Reynolds maintained remarkable composure despite the increasingly concerning tactical situation. Update on evidence. Deployment timeline: 2 hours, 17 minutes to scheduled distribution, Wilson reported. Servers secure, deadman protocols active. Technical team implementing additional encryption and distribution pathways. This confirmation provided crucial context for their defensive requirements. They didn't need to defeat the opposing forces indefinitely, only maintain system integrity long enough for the evidence to deploy. Once that occurred, Northern Resources' motivation for assault would fundamentally change, likely leading to withdrawal rather than continued engagement. Logan, Captain Reynolds, and Scout held their observation position as tribal security reinforcements. Arrived, establishing improved defensive positions with clear fields of fire covering likely approach paths. The reservation forces displayed impressive adaptability, compensating for limited tactical training with intimate knowledge of the terrain and absolute commitment to their mission. "Your people understand what's at stake," Logan observed to Chairman Cameron, who had arrived with the reinforcement team. "Water is life," the chairman replied simply. "Protecting our watersheds isn't policy. It's sacred responsibility. Every person here knows someone affected by the contamination. Children with unexplained illnesses, elders with respiratory distress, livestock born with deformities. This isn't abstract for us." This perspective reinforced the fundamental reality underlying their tactical situation. Beyond evidence and accountability lay the concrete human impact of Northern Resources' environmental crimes. The contaminated watersheds affected real communities, real families, with consequences that would persist for generations without intervention and remediation. As midnight approached, the reconnaissance teams maintained their positions, continuing observation while apparently awaiting final authorization or additional assets. The temporary stalemate provided opportunity for defensive refinement, with Logan working alongside tribal security to establish improved cover, communications, and coordination between response teams. Scout remained the most effective early warning system, his heightened senses repeatedly detecting movement or position adjustments before technical surveillance could confirm. Captain Reynolds translated the dog's subtle behavioral changes into tactical intelligence with remarkable precision, demonstrating the extraordinary partnership they had developed through years of operational experience. 1 hour, 30 minutes to evidence deployment, Wilson updated. "Be advised, we're detecting attempted cyber intrusion into our networks. Technical team implementing countermeasures." This development suggested Northern Resource was pursuing multiple vectors simultaneously: physical assault preparation, alongside technical attempts to compromise the evidence distribution systems. Their comprehensive approach confirmed both their resources and their desperation to prevent public exposure of their environmental crimes. Logan observed the Northern reconnaissance team adjusting positions slightly, suggesting preparation for potential movement. Their patience and discipline reinforced his assessment of their specialized capabilities. These weren't impulsive contractors, but experienced operators executing carefully designed tactical plans. The coming hour would determine whether Northern Resource would commit to direct assault or maintain legal pretense. Either approach carried significant risk for the corporation. Violent action against a sovereign tribal facility would create legal vulnerability regardless of outcome, while continued delay increased the likelihood of evidence deployment. As Logan considered these tactical dynamics, he recognized that regardless of the imminent confrontation's outcome, their actions had already fundamentally changed the situation. The evidence they had secured, the survivors they had protected, and the distribution systems they had established ensured that Northern Resources' environmental crimes would face public scrutiny and legal accountability. Even if their defensive position was eventually overwhelmed, the truth would emerge. That certainty represented victory regardless of personal outcomes, the principle that had drawn Logan from isolation, that had driven Scout to seek help against impossible odds, that had sustained Captain Reynolds through captivity and interrogation. The knowledge provided a form of peace amid preparations for potential conflict. They had already succeeded in the most meaningful sense, creating circumstances where truth would prevail against power, where corporate criminality would face accountability, where contaminated communities would receive recognition and potential remediation. As Scout subtly alerted to additional movement from the Northern team, Logan and Captain Reynolds exchanged a brief glance that communicated shared understanding of both the tactical situation and the larger purpose that united them. Whatever came next, they had already honored their deepest commitments to justice, to community, to the fundamental principle that some battles must be fought regardless of personal cost. The night stretched before them, tense with anticipation and pregnant with possibility as they prepared to defend not just a facility, but the very concept that truth deserves protection against those with power and resources to suppress it. The first shots came at precisely 12:43 a.m., a coordinated initiation from 3 separate positions surrounding the environmental center. The tactical teams had maintained their observation positions for nearly 2 hours, seemingly awaiting specific authorization or the arrival of additional assets. When the assault began, it displayed the hallmarks of professional operation, synchronized, precise, and measured. "Taking fire, northwest position," reported the tribal security officer at the northern perimeter, his voice remarkably calm despite the urgency. "Suppression pattern, not directed at personnel. They're establishing fire superiority." Similar reports came simultaneously from the southeastern and western defensive positions. The pattern confirmed Logan's tactical assessment. This wasn't an attempt to inflict casualties, but to establish control of the engagement area, pinning defensive personnel in position while specialized teams maneuvered toward primary objectives. "They're creating access corridors," Logan explained to Captain Reynolds as they maintained their defensive position. "Standard approach for compound penetration when priority is accessing specific areas rather than clearing the entire facility." Captain Reynolds nodded, understanding. "Their primary objective will be the server room. Secondary targets include surviving witnesses, Lisa, myself, you." The tactical dynamics shifted rapidly as Northern Resources teams began executing their coordinated approach. Suppression fire maintained pressure on defensive positions, while specialized elements moved through carefully created gaps in the coverage. The reservation's defensive forces responded with disciplined resistance, demonstrating unexpected effectiveness despite their limited tactical training. "Update on evidence deployment," Wilson's voice came through communications. "Background noise indicating heightened activity in the command center. Technical team reports accelerated intrusion attempts against server security, implementing contingency protocols. Adjusted deployment timeline, 52 minutes to distribution." This information crystallized the immediate priority. Maintaining server integrity for less than an hour would ensure successful evidence distribution, regardless of the tactical outcome afterward. Logan, Captain Reynolds, and Scout relocated to defensive positions closer to the facility's core, where they could provide maximum protection to the critical systems. The assault teams continued their methodical approach, their tactics revealing increasing urgency as they encountered stronger than anticipated resistance. The tribal security forces utilized their intimate knowledge of the facility and surrounding terrain to compensate for the attackers' superior equipment and training, creating effective defensive zones that channeled approaching elements into predetermined engagement areas. "Six-man team approaching east entrance," reported one of the observation posts. "Tactical formation, specialized equipment. Appears to be their primary penetration element." Chairman Cameron, who had assumed operational coordination of the tribal forces, immediately redirected reinforcements to intercept the approaching team. Logan recognized the chairman's natural tactical instinct, concentrating defensive resources at the point of greatest threat rather than maintaining even distribution across all sectors. "They're adapting to our defensive arrangement," Logan observed to Captain Reynolds as they monitored tactical feeds, shifting from multiple vectors to concentrated approach through eastern sector. Captain Reynolds analyzed the developing situation with professional clarity. "Eastern sector provides most direct access to server facilities. They've identified our critical vulnerability and are focusing resources accordingly." This assessment prompted immediate recalibration of their defensive strategy. Logan, Captain Reynolds, and Scout moved to reinforce the eastern defensive line, positioning themselves at a critical junction that controlled access to the facility's core technical areas. Additional tribal security personnel joined them, creating a layered defense that would force attackers to navigate multiple engagement points to reach the servers. The assault intensified as Northern Resources teams recognized the defensive repositioning. Suppression fire increased in volume and precision, utilizing specialized munitions to create obscuration and confusion. Flashbang grenades and smoke. Canisters deployed near defensive positions, temporarily degrading visibility and communication. "They're creating conditions for final approach," Logan warned as the tactical pattern became clear. "Prepare for direct engagement within 2 to 3 minutes. Scouts' behavior shifted from alert observation to focused intensity, the dog's specialized training identifying threat patterns beyond human perception. Captain Reynolds responded immediately to these subtle cues, repositioning their defensive element to address the approaching danger Scout had detected. "Movement, southeast corridor," she reported calmly. "Scout has multiple targets approaching under cover of smoke." The specialized assault team emerged from the artificial obscuration with practiced coordination. 6 operators in full tactical gear, moving in staggered formation that maximized coverage while minimizing exposure. Their equipment and movement. Discipline confirmed Logan's earlier assessment. These were former military special operations personnel, likely with extensive combat experience. What followed was a textbook example of modern close-quarters combat. The assault team deployed flash suppression devices while advancing through pre-established fire lanes. The defensive position responded with disciplined resistance using overlapping fields of fire to create maximum challenge to the approaching force. Logan, operating with the muscle memory developed through years of combat experience, maintained tactical discipline despite the chaotic environment. Each movement, each firing position, each reload executed with economies of motion that reflected extensive training and operational experience. Beside him, Captain Reynolds demonstrated equally impressive capability, her movements coordinated with Logan's, as if they had operated together for years rather than days. Scout's contribution proved equally valuable. The dog's behavioral alerts providing crucial warning of flanking attempts or position shifts that might otherwise have gone undetected amid the confusion of engagement. The extraordinary partnership between handler and dog translated into tactical advantage that partially offset the assault team's numerical and equipment superiority. The engagement intensified as the assault team pressed their approach with increasing urgency. Their tactical discipline remained impressive despite mounting resistance, suggesting awareness of specific timeline requirements. They needed to reach the server room before evidence deployment could complete. 37 minutes to distribution, Wilson updated from the command center. Servers secure, but under sustained cyber attack. Technical team implementing final protection protocols. This confirmation reinforced the defending force's primary objective, delaying the assault team long enough for evidence distribution to execute. They didn't need to defeat the superior force, only prevent them from reaching critical systems for the remaining deployment window. The tactical situation evolved rapidly as additional Northern Resource personnel joined the primary assault element, increasing pressure on the defensive position. Logan recognized the approach pattern from his military experience. They were establishing a section-by-section penetration, securing each area before advancing to the next, methodically working toward their primary objective. "We need to adjust," Logan told Captain Reynolds during a brief lull in the engagement. "Their current rate of advance will reach the server room before distribution completes." Captain Reynolds processed this assessment with characteristic clarity. "Recommendation: tactical withdrawal to secondary position," Logan suggested. "Force them to reset their approach, create new engagement parameters, extend their timeline." The strategy represented standard defensive doctrine against superior forces, trading space for time, utilizing sequential defensive positions to delay rather than halt enemy advance. Captain Reynolds immediately recognized the tactical soundness of the approach, coordinating with tribal security to implement the repositioning. As they executed the tactical withdrawal, Scout suddenly alerted to a new threat, his posture indicating detection of approach from an unexpected vector. Captain Reynolds immediately responded to the dog's warning, redirecting attention to a service corridor that had apparently been overlooked in defensive planning. Two assault team members emerged from the corridor, having utilized maintenance passageways to bypass primary defensive positions. Their appearance would have created devastating surprise advantage if not for Scout's extraordinary detection capabilities. The engagement occurred at extremely close quarters, less than 10 yards separating opposing forces. In such confined space, training and reaction speed determined survival. Logan and Captain Reynolds responded with coordinated precision, neutralizing the immediate threat without serious injury to themselves or the tribal security personnel. They're using building schematics, Logan realized, recognizing the tactical approach, identifying alternative access routes to primary objectives. This development necessitated immediate reassessment of their defensive strategy. The assumption of sequential penetration through established corridors no longer applied. Multiple small teams might be navigating throughout the facility using maintenance passages and service corridors. "Wilson!" Captain Reynolds communicated urgently. "Be advised, assault teams have facility schematics. They're utilizing maintenance passageways for access. Server room may be approached from multiple vectors simultaneously." "Understood," Wilson replied, background noise indicating increased activity. Implementing additional security measures. Around server room, 25 minutes to distribution. The tactical situation had become significantly more complex. Rather than defending against a single advancing force, they now needed to anticipate multiple approach vectors while maintaining sufficient personnel at each potential access point. Their limited defensive resources would be stretched increasingly thin against this distributed threat. In response to this challenge, Captain Reynolds made a critical decision that reflected both tactical necessity and personal courage. "Logan, take Scout and 4 security personnel to establish final defensive position directly at server room. I'll coordinate mobile response teams to intercept approaching elements before they converge." The division of responsibility demonstrated Captain Reynolds' leadership capability and tactical understanding. By positioning Logan and Scout at the critical objective while maintaining mobile interdiction teams under her command, she created optimal utilization of their limited defensive resources. Logan and Scout established the final defensive perimeter around the server room, utilizing available materials to create improvised barriers and channeling obstacles that would force any approaching team to navigate predictable paths. The tribal security personnel positioned themselves according to Logan's direction, creating overlapping fields of fire that maximized their defensive capability. 19 minutes to distribution, Wilson reported from inside the secured server room. Technical team confirms all systems operational despite ongoing cyber attacks. Distribution packages prepared for deployment. This update provided crucial motivation to the defending personnel, the concrete timeline reinforcing that their resistance had specific purpose and measurable outcome. They didn't need to prevail indefinitely, only maintain position for the specified window to ensure evidence deployment. Scout's behavior suddenly shifted, indicating detection of approaching threat before any human perception could confirm. Logan immediately reinforced the defensive position, covering the indicated direction, trusting the dog's extraordinary capability without question. Moments later, the assault team initiated their final approach, a three-direction, simultaneous penetration attempt designed to overwhelm the remaining defensive position. The coordinated attack demonstrated the operators' professional capability and determination to complete their mission despite sustained resistance. What followed was the most intensive phase of the engagement, close-quarters combat amid the confined spaces surrounding the server room. The defending personnel utilized their prepared positions to maximum advantage, creating sustained resistance that forced the attacking elements to advance with increasing caution and deliberation. Scouts' contribution proved invaluable during this critical phase. The dog's alerting behaviors provided consistent early warning of movement or position changes, allowing defensive personnel to anticipate and respond to developing threats before they materialized. This capability partially offset the attackers' numerical advantage and superior equipment. 12 minutes to distribution, Wilson updated from within the server room. Final encryption and transmission preparations underway. Deadman protocols. At maximum sensitivity, any interruption triggers immediate deployment. The assault team's approach reflected awareness of this diminishing timeline, their movement becoming more aggressive, accepting greater exposure in exchange for accelerated advance. This increasing urgency created both vulnerability and danger, as professional operators began prioritizing objective completion over tactical security. Logan recognized the shift in enemy approach and adjusted defensive response accordingly. Rather than maintaining conventional firing positions, the defensive team adopted unpredictable movement patterns that created maximum disruption to the attacker's advance calculations. This adaptive approach further extended the timeline, forcing assault elements to continuously reassess and adjust rather than executing predetermined movements. "Captain Reynolds, status?" Logan requested through communications, concerned by lack of update from the mobile response teams. "Multiple engagements throughout facility," came her terse reply, background noise indicating active combat. "Intercepted at least 3 additional teams attempting to access server section, continuing to delay and disrupt." This confirmation reinforced the comprehensive nature of Northern Resources' assault. They had committed significant resources across multiple vectors, likely representing their entire available operational capability in desperate attempt to prevent evidence distribution. 8 minutes to distribution, Wilson reported, his voice maintaining remarkable calm despite the intensifying situation. "System stable, packages prepared, transmission pathways secured." The defenders had succeeded in delaying the assault long enough to bring evidence deployment within realistic reach, a remarkable achievement against superior numbers and specialized capability. This realization seemed to penetrate the attacking force as well, their approach becoming increasingly desperate as the timeline for mission success diminished. In this critical phase, Scout suddenly exhibited unique behavior, moving from his defensive position beside Logan toward one of the barricaded entrances, his posture indicating recognition rather than threat detection. Logan initially interpreted this as potential friendly approach, perhaps Captain Reynolds or reinforcement personnel. Instead, Scout's behavior signaled something entirely unexpected. The dog moved to a specific position and produced a distinctive vocalization. Not an alert or warning, but a specific communication pattern. From beyond the barricade came an answering call, followed by the appearance of another military working dog, a German shepherd wearing tactical vest with markings matching Scout's. "Echo," Logan identified, recognizing the dog from photographs at the destroyed training facility. One of Scout's teammates, another specialized search and rescue dog from Captain Reynolds' unit, somehow having survived the attack and tracked their location through extraordinary determination. The unexpected arrival created momentary confusion. Among both defenders and attackers, the sheer improbability of a second military working dog appearing amid active combat, temporarily disrupting tactical focus. Logan immediately recognized the potential advantage and directed Echo toward Wilson in the server room, understanding intuitively that the dog would provide additional security capability during this critical phase. 5 minutes to distribution, Wilson confirmed, surprise evident in his voice as Echo joined him in the secure location. All systems operational, final countdown initiated. The assault teams launched their most aggressive approach yet, a synchronized multi-vector advance clearly designed as final attempt to reach the server room before evidence deployment. The defensive position responded with coordinated resistance, each team member demonstrating remarkable discipline despite sustained combat and mounting fatigue. Scout resumed his defensive position beside Logan, the brief reunion with his teammate, seemingly providing renewed energy and focus. His alerting behaviors continued, providing crucial tactical advantage, identifying approach vectors and position changes before human defenders could perceive the developing threats. 3 minutes to distribution, came Wilson's update. System, initiating final protocols. Be advised, even if servers are compromised now, distribution packages have entered automated deployment sequence. This announcement represented virtual achievement of their primary mission. The evidence packages had progressed to a stage where physical access to the servers would no longer prevent distribution. The defending personnel had successfully maintained position long enough to ensure mission completion. The realization seemed to penetrate the attacking force as well. Their approach pattern shifted subtly, transitioning from determined advance towards server access to more conventional combat engagement. This tactical adjustment suggested changed priorities. Having failed to prevent evidence deployment, they now focused on neutralizing witnesses and surviving team members. Distribution initiated, Wilson announced at precisely 2:17 a.m. Evidence. Packages deploying to all designated recipients. Primary mission objective achieved. The confirmation created momentary sensation of victory among defending personnel, though tactical reality remained unchanged. They continued facing superior forces in challenging defensive conditions. The evidence might be deploying, but their personal situation remained precarious. Captain Reynolds's voice came through communications, calm but urgent. All teams be advised. Northern approach shows vehicle movement consistent with reinforcement or extraction. Unknown capabilities. Approaching estimated arrival 3 to 5 minutes. This development introduced new tactical uncertainty. The approaching vehicles might represent either additional Northern resource assets or potential federal response prompted by the reservation's emergency notifications. Either possibility necessitated adjustment to defensive positioning and response protocols. Logan, maintaining tactical discipline despite the evolving situation, reorganized their defensive perimeter to address potential new threats while sustaining resistance against continuing assault. Scout remained vigilant beside him, the dog's extraordinary stamina and focus undiminished despite the extended engagement. Evidence distribution at 40%, Wilson reported. Packages confirmed, received by 7 primary recipients, including 3 national news organizations. Information release has begun. This confirmation transformed the tactical dynamic fundamentally. Northern Resources' primary objective had failed. The environmental crimes, corporate corruption and political protection had begun entering public awareness. Whatever happened to the individuals at the environmental center, the truth had escaped containment. The approaching vehicles arrived. At the facility perimeter, their distinctive profile immediately recognizable to both Logan and Captain Reynolds. Federal response teams, likely FBI tactical units deployed under emergency authorization. Their arrival represented potential salvation for the defending personnel, but created new tactical complexity as three separate forces now converged at the facility. All personnel hold positions, Captain Reynolds directed through communications. Maintain defensive posture, but do not engage federal response teams. Repeat, do not engage federal units. The assault teams clearly received similar communication from their command structure. Their engagement pattern shifted dramatically, disengaging from direct combat while establishing covered positions that suggested defensive rather than offensive priority. Their tactical objective had evidently changed from facility penetration to personnel extraction. The federal response deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing perimeter control while identifying and isolating existing engagement areas. Their arrival introduced formal authority that fundamentally altered the conflict dynamics. Northern Resources' private military contractors now faced potential federal charges if they continued offensive operations. Evidence distribution at 73%, Wilson updated. Packages confirmed, received by 12 primary recipients. Initial news reports appearing on digital platforms. Information containment definitively breached. The situation had resolved with extraordinary outcome. Successful evidence distribution, arrival of federal response, and survival of key witnesses despite overwhelming tactical disadvantage. The defending personnel maintained disciplined positions as federal teams began methodical clearing of the facility, documenting the engagement scene while securing both defensive and attacking personnel. As the tactical situation stabilized, Logan found himself experiencing complex, emotional response. The immediate threat had passed, the evidence had deployed successfully, and federal authorities had assumed jurisdiction. Yet the intensity of commitment, the clarity of purpose, and the profound sense of meaningful action remained. Scout stayed positioned beside him, the dog's alertness gradually transitioning from combat vigilance to professional attentiveness. As federal teams secured the environment, the extraordinary K9 had demonstrated capabilities beyond conventional understanding, not merely executing trained behaviors, but adapting to evolving situations with apparent comprehension of complex objectives. Captain Reynolds joined them as federal teams completed initial facility clearance, her expression reflecting both exhaustion and profound satisfaction. Evidence deployment reached 87% before servers were secured, more than enough to ensure comprehensive distribution. Northern Resources teams are standing down, Logan observed, noting the organized withdrawal of assault elements under federal supervision. They recognize containment failure. The appearance of Chairman Cameron completed their informal circle, the tribal leader's dignified presence undiminished despite the night's intense events. Federal teams report initial news coverage already appearing on major networks. The evidence has created immediate response. This confirmation represented the ultimate validation of their efforts. The truth had not merely escaped containment, but had immediately entered public consciousness. Northern Resources' environmental crimes, their political protection, and their violent suppression of whistleblowers would face comprehensive scrutiny and potential accountability. As federal teams established order throughout the facility, Echo rejoined Scout and Captain Reynolds, the two dogs displaying subtle interactions that suggested communication beyond human comprehension. Their reunion represented another extraordinary element in an already remarkable sequence of events. Two military working dogs somehow surviving the attack on their facility, separately navigating impossible odds to contribute to mission success. I never anticipated this outcome when Scout appeared at my cabin, Logan acknowledged, the understatement drawing tired smiles from both Captain Reynolds and Chairman Cameron. Sometimes the most important missions find us rather than us finding them, Captain Reynolds observed, watching her extraordinary canine partners with evident pride. The simple statement captured the essence of their shared experience. None had sought this conflict, yet each had discovered profound purpose through responding to necessity rather than ambition. The challenges had revealed capabilities, created connections, and demonstrated possibilities beyond what any had imagined in isolation. As dawn approached, bringing first light to the reservation landscapes, Logan Hayes found himself contemplating possibilities he had abandoned years ago. His self-imposed isolation had provided escape from disillusionment, but had denied fundamental human purpose, contributing specialized capability toward meaningful outcome within community. Scout and Echo, having fulfilled their extraordinary mission, finally allowed themselves rest, settling beside Captain Reynolds with the earned contentment of absolutely fulfilled duty. Their example offered profound lesson: loyalty, courage, and purpose directed toward worthy objective could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Whatever came next, federal investigation, corporate prosecution, environmental remediation, the essential victory had been secured. Truth had prevailed against power, accountability had been established against corruption, and principles had proven stronger than resources. And for Logan Hayes, something even more significant had occurred: the rediscovery of purpose beyond mere survival, connection beyond isolation, and the profound satisfaction of applying specialized capability toward outcome that genuinely mattered. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.